So the first thing you have to do is be able to pull out this center section, which is of course going to be your horn, but also like your airbag and all that in there. So you are going to be a little bit careful. Now to pop this little airbag section out, there are going to be little holes here on both sides of the steering wheel. There's going to be one here, and there's also going to be one here on the other side that you're going to depress with anything that's small enough to fit through that to give you enough force to kind of put it out. Now once I have it out, I'm going to show you what you're trying to do to get it out. You're just going to put this in, push a little spring, and kind of pull it out one side at a time. So as you push this little device, whatever you're using, push it straight in firmly. If you can pull just the lip of the airbag out, you have to do this half at a time. So now I'm here over on the driver's side. Same thing, push it out so I can remove the whole airbag. Once you have it pulled out this far, there's two little harnesses of wires you have to pull out to get the whole thing to come out. Again, be careful, this is your airbag. I don't think it's delicate, but you don't want to hit it in such a way that's going to pop out and hit your face. So before I pull the wires out, let me show you what's happening when I depress that little spring inside to help you better understand how you might be able to pull yours out. So I'm just using this little T-handled Allen wrench. Again, I'm just going to put it in this little hole. And you can see here, you can see as I push, I move that little spring open in there. It's moving it back. That little ring sets in this gap, so when you push it, it just opens it up a little bit to allow this whole steering wheel to pull out. Then I'll reach in and undo both harnesses, including the one that pulls the whole airbag itself out. You can see I was unhooking this like dark purple harness from the steering wheel, while the yellow one stayed attached to the little airbag assembly, nonetheless, just so it unhooks and comes out. Although you can do this with it down, I think it's easier to go ahead and pull these big 4 screws out now. To get those 4 screws out, I'm going to use a T30 bit, but you can use any standard Allen wrench that you'd like. Again, these 4 screws aren't holding the steering wheel onto the column itself. They're just holding that little black plastic U that's just holding all your electrical in a little harness together. The next step is you have one more really big bolt that's right down the center of the shaft holding this whole steering wheel onto the column. I'm going to use a large, like a 10 millimeter Allen to get this out. You can use something of similar. This is usually on here with pretty good force. Oh my God. So as you saw, I tried to break it loose with this giant T-handled little Allen wrench. It's on there pretty tight. So what I've done now is I went and grabbed a socket. This is a T55. This is what puts in here. I've got a little bit of an extension, and I have like it's just the impact socket that I have. So I'm gonna see if I can break it open with this instead, because it's on there good, but again, you expect it to be on there good because it's literally holding your whole steering wheel column together. While it still took some muscle, I was finally able to break it loose. And once you break it loose from that initial thread seal, it actually comes out pretty easy. In fact, I pulled the extension off here and just did it by hand. Then from there, the whole wheel just pulls off with a very moderate amount of force. Then there's 4 screws that are holding all the guts in from the inside from the outside. There's just 4 little screws to take out, one in each corner, kind of all the way around. Once you have those out, I'll flip it over, and then I'll take a little trim tool here just to pry off the very fronts of both of the different control panels. Although I did it pretty careful, it wasn't really that complicated, and actually both of these came off with just a minimal amount of effort. And then when it flips back around, I pull out the screw that the ground wire is attached to. So now that I have the 4 screws in the back removed, the little screw on the inside removed, I'm gonna go ahead and pop out this little kind of like a U-shaped piece of plastic right there, because I need to get underneath that to take some more screws out. So I just pry that little piece of plastic out with my pocket knife, and once that's removed, I pull out 3 separate, very small screws. So next, we're gonna make this easier on ourselves, and we're gonna pull out this whole little U of electrical wires. There's just one little wire harness you have to pull apart down below here. It's actually not even really a harness, it's just pulling it off of like a ground wire that holds it to this frame itself. Then below that, you're gonna see you got now 2 more really small set screws you got to pull out to be able to pull this back piece off from the steering wheel. This little screw is actually a T8, or it could be a really small corresponding Allen. So these 2 T8 screws we now know pull out really easy. They're actually not even in that tight. Once you have those out, I flip it over and start using this little trim tool just to pry the old plastic shell free of the frame of the wheel, just so we can take out a few more screws. So you can come in close here to kind of see. There's a little hook here on this. This is going to hook on a little loop in here like this. So it's really important when you pull the whole thing out, you get it loose, you want to pull it straight back away from the wheel like this, or you'll break those clips inside. Now what's left is take out these two little controls, the left and right. These are held in by 3 separate of those same little T8 screws. Now we're going to undo these 2 wire harnesses. We're going to get to that bottom screw also. So for time's sake, we're speeding the camera up here 5 times, but it's actually really simple. That same little T8 wrench, you're going to take out 6 screws, 3 on each side. Just be careful not to lose them, although you're not going to be reusing them. At this point, you'll notice the whole control section starts to get a little floppy, but don't forget to undo these little 2 wire harnesses that are holding those little connections in electrically on each side. And while I can't pull out the control system yet, I can remove this little bottom U piece of plastic on the base of the wheel. There are 2 more of those T8 screws, 1 on each side. You have to pull out the top. Once those are removed, you just kind of finagle these 2 little sections out. I had to kind of pry apart just a little bit. Once you have them apart, they do pull out pretty easy. Then you just have what's left is the little piece of plastic housing, and the wires are kind of stuck on that through some clips and some channels. You'll pull it loose, it looks like this. Now you can kind of see, here's the new Yoke steering wheel, and here's the controls that we have. So obviously now we have to pull our new steering wheel apart. Now this one's going to be pretty easy because it's all just pressed on, so it's just a matter of prying all the way around. Here we go. So I don't know if there's really a right or wrong way to approach it. I did the bottom first and the top, but as I mentioned, it's all just pressed on, so you're just creating a little bit of separation and then prying the 2 sides apart. Once you get that done, I pulled the wires off of the actual controls that are going to go in the handles of each side, then just kind of put them in where they naturally kind of just clip in, of course keeping them same sides, left side and right side. But once you're all done with that, they really just kind of clip into place and it's not too bad. Then you put this little harness inside and you're ready to move on to the wiring. I separated the little U bracket with the springs from this little mount. You just sort of didn't have to now that I see that in hindsight, but it's probably still easiest. The orange is going to be on the right, the blue or the black tape is going to be on the left. And I'm just kind of tucking this back in here a little bit to put it back down into place. Like so, making sure you're not pinching anything. And when it's in right, you'll kind of see, but there's a little spring that's going to fit just over this circle here, and that spring's over it, you know you're good. Now I'm going to screw that little U bracket back on with these 4 little bolts that look like this. I pulled these out when it was still on the column in the beginning. Okay, so as I put these 4 bolts in, I would recommend if you're doing this, you don't feel the need to snug these down as tight as possible, because you can always do that a little bit later, and I found I actually needed slightly more slack for these 2 cables. The ones with the orange, the one with the black tapes on the right and left. Do make sure you get this ground screw tight though, because there's no point where you wouldn't want to do that. Then I kind of just started plugging these things in, the wire from the control into the middle of this, at least the ones you could. Now, I did try to tuck these in as much as possible. As you'll see here in a minute, the airbag completely fills this whole center void, so you need to push these to the side as much as possible. So here, as you'll notice, I'm actually struggling because I don't have that much slack to actually plug that wire into each of these controls, which made it more difficult. So I actually ended up kind of pulling it loose a little bit more, so it was good that I didn't have those 4 bolts I mentioned snug down. I'm dry fitting the airbag here. I would recommend that because you might be like me and find that it doesn't quite fit. Okay, so in pushing this all back together as I kind of dry fit the airbag, I realized that my voids are going to be right in here and also right in here on this side. I need this to be really free of obstruction of any kind. So I made sure that these harnesses, both on this side and up here on this side, are tucked back up into here, and your slack is just kind of running on the inside. If that harness is kind of tucked in the side, that airbag's going to bump it. From this point, each of the faces click right back on, literally just kind of click into place, no screws or anything like that. And until this point, I went ahead and actually tightened all 4 of these bolts down as much as they could go. So my steering wheel naturally stopped in a position slightly to the left. You can kind of force this around a little bit with your fingers to where this notch is right on top. You don't have to do that, but I think that's going to be easier when I go to line this up. So here I'm just going to show you as I put it just right on, just lining up this little notch right down the middle here, as you can see. It's really that simple. When you have it lined up straight, it goes right in. Those little clear housing wire harnesses all slide right back in, nothing to it, and then you have full range control and movement of your truck again. Then I snapped in the maroon harness back into the left side. I'm gonna go ahead and snug again this giant T55 wrench back in. And if you remember, this was really hard to get out, so I made sure I put it back in really tight, and I put some muscle to it because this is the only thing holding your steering wheel on. Then you're good to plug in the harness and snap that airbag back into place.